I'd like to make an update video to the cheap carbon forks made for the Brompton that I installed a few months ago on my own bike. So I've ridden this cheap 80-pound fork that I've seen on sale now for 66 pounds for about 1,700 kilometers. And you can see my initial first impressions and installation video here, but it does have some outdated information that I have since learned, which I will correct in this video. So these are kind of a drop-in replacement for the standard Brompton front fork, and it actually has the ability to mount both regular caliper brakes along with disc brakes. So yeah, you can have some flexibility. So like in my current build, I have these fitted with hydraulic front brakes. Besides the option for disc brakes, the obvious upgrade reason is weight savings. So over the standard steel forks, you're saving about 280 grams of weight. And with an 80-pound like upgrade cost, that's like a ridiculous dollar to weight savings. And obviously when it comes to bikes, weight savings isn't everything. My philosophy with this is that the Brompton's built for like a weight capacity of 110 kilogram rider. And since I only weigh like less than 70 kilos, why am I carrying all this extra weight in steel? So yeah, by the time of the release of this video, I've ridden this about 1,700 kilometers with the same Z-Race hydraulic brakes. I've taken the bike touring on gravel trails, switchbacks, downhill descents going 60 kilometers an hour with like several hard stops and 4 flights in soft padded bags. I've even crashed it a couple times. So I think I've really put it through some testing. So briefly speaking, it seems like these Riro carbon forks are a direct copy of the Silverock carbon forks that sell for 3 or 4 times the price. And from what I can tell from photos is that the stem part that connects to the carbon and alloy has better finishing. This is just the surface level differences I've spotted, but it's hard to say what the carbon layup differences would be without seeing how it's made or cutting both in half and comparing. The Silverock one also includes a metal sleeve for the bonded section of the fork, which is probably a preventative measure from over-torquing the stem and splitting it like what occurred on the old titanium forks with the old wedge style. The older expansion plug on the left has a smaller area that pushes against the steer tube, which means more force concentrated on one area, which increases the likelihood that it'll split it, versus the one on the right, which has a wider area contacting the steer tube. Because this steer tube is made of some aluminum alloy, it'll be susceptible to splitting if you over torque it as well. And here's the torque settings that they give. Weight-wise, the Riro and Silverock appear almost the same when you take out the metal sleeve, which leads me to believe that the carbon thickness and material should be pretty similar. Obviously, there could still be a lot of differences in terms of layup quality, resin quality, overall quality control, but shape-wise they're identical as far as I can tell. Note that you can also buy a similar metal sleeve if you wanted to. I've seen titanium sleeves that were sold to repair split titanium forks, so that sleeve should fit these carbon forks as well. But definitely follow the torque guidelines and make sure you have a stem with the newer wedge style. In my previous first look video, I thought there was a manufacturing defect where the stem would leave a gap above the headset.
As I mentioned, because there's that carbon section that goes into the alloy tube, this stem part can't go deep enough inside.
While technically still a manufacturing defect, it was easier to resolve than I thought. There was just a bit of epoxy and carbon that was in the way of fully inserting the stem wedge. The epoxy was just left over from bonding the alloy steer tube to the lower fork. After scraping the inner headset tube a bit to get rid of the epoxy with a long screwdriver, the stem would fully insert, so that spacer I made in the previous video isn't necessary. Also, maybe I was a bit over dramatic in adding an extra detent for the dropout. It's not really necessary, and even the Silverock fork does not have it. I'm not sure why, but yeah, you definitely don't need to bring out the drill like I did. Even though the brake caliper mounts did not look faced, I didn't have issues with caliper misalignment, but that might just be my luck, or yeah, it could vary. I've also gathered some information from Facebook and Reddit from people who've actually used this fork as well. And they seem to have broadly similar issues of quality control. So for example, this one person had issues with the misaligned caliper brake holes. Again, like I didn't have issues, but apparently he did. Excess resin in certain areas. Similar kind of quality control problems. I've seen on AliExpress reviews that they also had issues with resin in the fork steering tube. There's a lot of resellers, and some of the listings get taken down, so you might not see all the negative reviews. So just keep in mind what you're getting yourself into for 60, 70, 80 pounds. That you could have issues that might be resolved by yourself, such as the resin in the steering tube issue. But if it's like misaligned brake holes, depending on how misaligned they are, it might not be easily remedied. The good thing is that AliExpress is actually pretty good with dispute resolution. They've been pretty fair with me in the past. Since this is a fairly niche part combination with 74 OLED spacing and disc brakes for 16-inch wheels, I think there's only a few part combinations that would work on this setup. It is a lot simpler though if you just want to use the standard brakes, since you don't have to change the wheels or brakes. And the wheel, fork, and brake setup I ended up with was the Riro carbon forks, the Silverock disc brake front wheel, and the Z-Race hydraulic brake. You should also be using 140mm rotors, because any bigger and you'll have a bit more interference with the fold. And while on the topic of disc rotors, you will need a 6-bolt pattern disc rotor spacer, approximately 3 to 4 millimeters in my situation. Since the 74mm fork spacing is quite narrow and niche to the Brompton, I'm not sure if there are any other alternatives out there. And this setup has worked for me in terms of foldability and rideability, so unless you want to experiment with building your own wheel, I'm not sure how many other options are out there.
One thing is that internal gear hub chain is very close to the rotor, but I don't think there'll be an issue there.
Oh, and check out how perfectly this folds in as well. Look at that. Wow. It's like it was made for it.
The clearances are quite tight, especially around the disc rotor, but I didn't have any issues with bending or warping of the rotor, even through several flights. So I do recommend being more careful with packing some padding between the fold. So I hope this video gives you a good idea of all the pros and cons of this fork. It's definitely not for everyone, but it's an interesting upgrade if you're looking to cut weight off the bike and you don't mind a bit of tinkering. Well, I hope this video has been interesting, and even if you're not planning to buy something like this, that it shows you what's out there. Thanks again for watching, and if there's interest, I'll do more product reviews in the future as well, so please subscribe to stay up to date.